Okay, excited to have EJ Henderson with us today for kind of our listen and learn opportunity. EJ was with us here at ONU in 2014. Just a guy we have a ton of respect for, and continues to be a rising star in the profession. I think when we hired him back in 2014, I'm glad you proved us right as a coaching staff that you're a rising star. Now he's at Princeton University. So anyways, just appreciate you coming in, EJ. Why don't you for those that don't know you well, you got a really unique experience of being being a Northwest,
Yes.
Northwest native, but why don't you kind of take us through some of your
Sure.
experience?
Well, I grew up in Seattle area, so I grew up, played football out there, kind of lived out there. My family is from Florida, if you will, Key West, Florida, which is a great vacation spot. I'm still a little bitter that I'm me out of there. Started coaching at Louisville, Kentucky, was a graduate assistant there. From there, I went to Mount Union, which is the school you may know a little bit about. And after Mount Union, I went to Wayne State in Detroit. After Detroit, was able to go to Princeton my first time in New Jersey, which was definitely a learning experience. And after there, I went to Davidson in North Carolina, which I didn't think I was ever going to move again. I know we talked about several jobs. I didn't think I was going to ever move again. And unfortunately, the head coach got fired. And then, I worked my way back around. I got hired by Coach Paul, which was an incredible experience. Loved my time there at Ohio Northern. And then right back to Wayne State, where my wife's from. We have family now. I wanted my family back to their grandparents. And then the second time around, going to the Ivy League. I think every time I go to Wayne State, I end up getting an Ivy League job. Went to Cornell for years. And now I'm back at Princeton. Got the job right before COVID hit, and then I've been really blessed throughout the situation. But at the same time, staying in contact with Coach Paul, and we talked along the way. And most of that time, I think the coach, I was an offensive guy for a long time. I've been coaching for 20 plus years. 12 of those years have been on offense. And the last few years, I'm back at defense, coaching defensive back. So I lived across the country. I've seen every aspect of, if you want to say, racism and its ugly head, as you will, on all different fashions of it. But at the same time, it doesn't stop me, and we just got to keep pushing forward and got to keep educating people.
I think those experiences you have of being in the Northwest and being in the Northeast and being in the Midwest and then being on the East, kind of more the Atlantic coast, or you just really big cities and small towns and everything else in between. You really have a wide range of experiences that not many people have had the opportunity to see the good and the bad.
Yes.
So and I do have to point out, you're pretty humble. You said you played football. You're an All-American. You're an All-American. Typical EJ fashion. Very, very humble. So yeah, you're a little more than just played football. So anyway, we'll get back to this topic that we wanted to talk about here. So one of the things you and I talked about, you shared back a while back a really, I thought, powerful graphic about basically the stages of becoming an anti-racist. So I'm putting that on the screen right now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I think hit home to me, a while back, was, some of the conversations about it's not enough to just not be a racist yourself. If you're really serious about this initiative, then you have to be an anti-racist. So I thought it'd be really helpful if maybe you just talked a little bit about some things on this. Can you see it now?
Yes, I get it. I can see. Yeah, my whole thought process behind this is that it all starts with each individual person. I think that some people do not know they're racist just because they're how they grew up, what was taught, and the people they communicate with. And I always say that we're all born with. Everybody says, my thought process is we're born colorblind. And what I mean by that, if I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, that's what I predominantly know is how the African-American way of living. If you grew up in a small town, that's all you know is how do you live in a small town environment. And then if you grew up in a really nice, rich, or really big, elaborate neighborhood, that's all you know. But, we're all colorblind because that's what we know and that's what we're used to. And then all of a sudden we get high-def TV glasses when we all become merged together. Then we get forced to learn what it was it like to be white in America, what's it like to be black in America, and all of a sudden then you start seeing your racism come out. What I mean by that, I remember talking to some friends of mine. I go, hey, growing up as an African American male, there's a such thing called the talk, And they go, what do you mean by the talk? I go, the talk is, growing up and your parents tell you how to address the police. For instance, don't be combative, do not be in denial. You just want to let him say what he has to say and don't argue so you can come home. And then I had some of my white friends who were like, there's no such thing, police are fair and equal to everybody. And I go, well, that's where it goes deny racism, where I said, I don't think it's, fair. There's racial profile. I've been pulled over, even in being in some Ivy League cities and even towns across the country. If you know me, it's a different deal because you know me. That's your perception of me. But the average person who's not the same color that doesn't know me, I could be intimidating. I'm 6'1", so I could be intimidating to some people, and they don't know who I am. But I just think a lot of people don't know how much racism, or doesn't know how much racism is in their heart until issues like what's just happened the last few weeks ago with Mr. George, the murder of Mr. George, or Mr. Floyd, I'm sorry, where now families are divided. I got some football players that I'm coaching now who are white, who are struggling with this because now they're starting to realize some family members are racist by the things they're saying to the TV.
Right.
But growing up in your colorblind glasses, you wouldn't think that just because you grew up in an environment that was natural. But when something happens that's out of the ordinary, then that's when, hey, you might be racist, or there's no way there's racial profile. I have friends that tell me there's no way there's racial profile. I even had friends recently, as yesterday, said there's no way there's a glass ceiling for African Americans or people of color. And I'm like, wow, what world do you live in? That's that first, you talk about the fear zone, and a lot of these people, and I say these people, I'm sorry to say it, but a lot of people do not want to have that tough conversation. Nobody, you're seeing it from far away. So when you see it from far away, everything is always good until it's in your yard. And when it's in your yard, then you have to react. And sometimes the reaction you have, if you've seen all the video stuff that comes out and the Central Park video, that's coming out, people are, they can sit there and say Black Lives Matters, and all of a sudden something happens in their yard, then all of a sudden a racist comment comes out. I'm going to call the police because an African American person is threatening me. But
Right.
that you can talk to 10 of their friends, you never thought that person would be that way.
So you think that sounds like a lot of the fear in learning, like trying to move past the fear zone of your comfort level, avoiding the hard questions, and just not even really denying that it is a problem, that those are really some common things you see in the fear zone.
Yeah, I think like you said, denying racism is a problem. I think that's the first step, but that first step, I don't think a lot of people know that's in them.
Right.
Avoid the hard questions. Even if a hard question comes out, are the police, and I'm just going to use this for example, are the police officer racial profile? Do they? And some people may know it, some people may not, but do they? That's a hard question you would have to look into and research. And strive, and it says strive to be comfortable, because what's comfortable for you, because all your life, we talk about, the big word out there is white privilege. And I talk to my white colleagues and my white friends, they're like, I don't know about white privilege because I always lived this way. So there's I think the fear zone is a zone that we live in, and it's just natural for us just because that's where we've always been in. And it's hard to figure out my racism.
When I think about that, that's why it's so important that we listen and we see something from another person's perspective, whether it's seeing someone get pulled over for no reason, whether it's, just certain things you see and you hear that are real things that happened, that I think sometimes when people hear white privilege, the first thought is, well, I had to work hard and nobody gave me anything. And what they're not realizing is the extra obstacles that others have to go through, and you have to recognize those, but it's hard to recognize them if you haven't seen them.
Exactly.
So I think that's where it's important, in my opinion, to listen and understand what others have had to go through, so that can maybe help you move out of that fear zone into the learning zone. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's what the first thing I tell most coaches who've asked me about this whole situation is that I said, just listen to your players. Just listen, because that's all they want. They want a voice. They just want you to listen, and then maybe you'll learn something if you just listen to them. Do we go into things that we always know, or we think we know more? I think that's where we get in trouble. But if you just listen to your players, or whoever, like a person of color, whatever, just listen and just be humble. And the thing I tell everyone, just be real. You can sit there and tell someone, I don't understand, or I didn't know this happened. That's just being real. But to say it never happened, to me, that's
Right.
not being, I don't think you're just being open about it.
That's a great point. I mean, it's one thing like you haven't seen it, but just to say that it hasn't happened just because you haven't seen it seems a little bit being close-minded and not listening to truly. One thing we didn't talk about, but I wanted to ask you about is, I people talk a lot about sometimes about tolerating, and I
Mhm.
think one thing that hit me home recently was trying to really discern the difference between tolerating and accepting. Like when I heard the word tolerating, like, hey, it's about tolerance. I don't know if I like that word because I feel like that's almost like putting up with, is what I think about when I hear the word tolerate, as opposed to accept, embrace those things that are different that we have, the things we don't have in common. Embrace the things we do have in common, but maybe more than just tolerate, accept and appreciate those that we have that are different. I mean, is that
I would, yeah, I would agree. The example I would use is, let's use what you would dress in. All right. So the probably the clothes that you would dress in is a little different than the clothes I would dress in.
mhm,
Is that tolerating, or is that accepting it?
right?
And regardless of, not unless I got some words or something that's totally offensive,
Yeah,
but if and I'm wearing African traditional colors, that offends some people. And I
right.
colors of my African descent, or the country I came from, or where my descent came from. But that's something like, do you tolerate? Do you accept it? And like I said, some people in the world that's offensive to them.
Yeah,
But hey, but this is who I am. And so I think that accepting everybody is what we want to do. That's
sure.
this is what we're getting close to, because I think the more you know about somebody and where they come from, or walk in their shoes, which we all can't walk in everybody's shoes. I get that. But the more you learn about somebody, the more you're able to accept them. And I don't think if you learn or to know somebody, you just tolerate it. So
Yeah.
you're just dealing with it, but you're not understanding it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing some of these thoughts, and I think I know it's helped me, and I hope others can listen and benefit from it as well. But any closing thoughts? Anything else that you want to hit on? Because we could go on for a while, and we better kind
Yeah.
of wrap it up.
Well, what I would say is definitely, just get to know the people around you. And I say it takes one person at a time. You can't change everybody at all times. Take one person, especially if a coach is in a leadership position, or a professor or a teacher. Just listen to the voices and what they have to say. And that's what most people want, is you to listen and to accept them for who they are. I think if we just do that and learn,
Yeah.
the biggest thing here is learn. And
Mhm.
you haven't seen a show 13 on Netflix, I think that's a really good big show of a lot of stuff of American history. But it starts with, it talks about being racist and how it
Mhm.
followed American history.
Sure.
Just
Well,
listen
yeah.
and learn.
No doubt. Good stuff. Please tell Katie, we said hello. It was great to know you guys when you're here in Ada, and continue to follow you and your success. And, you always have some friends here in Ada, people pulling for you, people in your
Thank you.
corner. And I'm going to continue to self-reflect. I think this all started with you, what you kind of were talking about initially, about just thinking about some of these things, listen, learn, and then self-reflect and see how you're applying some of these things. So I appreciate it, EJ. All
No
right.
problem. Thank you. Yeah.
I'll close this right here,